The last couple of weeks, have been talking about this idea of prosperity. It's a word that I chose to focus on this year, and this is part 3 of the 3-part talk. And we're going to visit again before the year's out, but I really wanted, as I thought about the last 2 weeks, I wanted you to be able to walk away with something that was a practical tool, if you will, for actually and legitimately changing some area of your life that where you would like more of it. Now, when we talk about prosperity, don't make the common mistake, which is some people, when they hear prosperity, they immediately think about money, right? But that's very limited in terms of what prosperity could be. It could be your health, it could be relationships, or some area in your life where you would just like to experience more of it. And so think about that when we go through today's talk, which is called Opening the Channel of Your Good, because that is the heart of, again, and I'm using Spiritual Economics, the book by Eric Butterworth, as the background for some of this stuff. That is the heart of what's going on, because as I mentioned in my first talk, this idea of prosperity, actually, it's kind of like you've got this faucet with a valve on it. And the truth of it is prosperity is always there. But what we have a tendency to do is, because of our beliefs, because of our perceptions, because of our thoughts and our feelings, if we're not careful, we can shut that baby off. And the next thing you know, we're not seeing very much prosperity. Again, I'll use financial as this example, showing up in our life. Why? Because we've shut it off, right? And again, knowing that the water really is always there, knowing that it's there. And it's because of our beliefs. In fact, Butterworth says all the substance of the universe and all the wealth that has ever manifested itself or ever will manifest itself in this world is present right now. So then, for those of you that have struggled, and by the way, we're going to talk about what my struggles look like this lifetime, which were many when it came to finances. But then the question is, okay, well, if it's there, why am I not having that experience? Why am I not having that experience, right? And so this talk is going to be, how can I actually do that? And so where do we start? So, good metaphysical students that we are, good unity people that we are, whenever we want to think about something's going on in our life that we are wanting to do, change it, where do we start? Come on. Where do we start? Inside. Thank you. Whew, man, I'm like, oh my God, am I? No. We start inside. It's our consciousness that we start looking at, right? It's our consciousness. That's what we believe. That's where we're going to go. And what Butterworth goes on to say, which this is so rich, you're always projecting some kind of thought towards everything that you have and hold. You're always projecting some kind of thought toward everything that you have or hold. So then the question is, well, what kind of thoughts are you projecting toward whatever you're wanting more of? I want you to think about that for a second. So when you think about something that you want more of, what kind of thoughts are you projecting? Are they more prosperous thoughts? Are they more abundant thoughts? Or are they thoughts of lack and limitation? And of course, there's never going to be any judgment or shame or blame or guilt here. But of course, I'm always going to poke you. You know that, right? Because I believe in who and what you are. And I know if we can clear a little bit of the fog in terms of your consciousness, then you'll have the experiencing you're wanting to have. That's kind of how it works, and that's how we believe that, right? And again, as a reference point, in the first couple of talks, I kept using the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, right? And we talked about this idea of Jesus coming from a prosperity consciousness, like, oh, feeding 5,000? No problem. We got it. And the disciples coming from a lack consciousness. How are we going to do this? Should we send them home? So, curious. Do you think there may have been a little bit of a difference between the two states of consciousness? Maybe just a little. Yeah, because Jesus looking at it going, no problem, we got this. Disciples are running around going, oh my God, what are we going to do? And by the way, we're all guilty of doing that. We are, right? I gave the story a couple of weeks ago when I went up and I was pulling up into the Starbucks, and then I pulled out of the parking lot because I sat there and said to myself, this is going to cost me $7. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to pay $7 for a cup of coffee that I really, 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 really wanted. But no, I started telling myself all this garbage that I put on this stupid cup of coffee. But that's what we do, right? So was I having like the most profound experience of prosperity consciousness? No, not exactly. And we all get caught up in that, right? So this past Thursday, Leah and I celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary. And it was, thank you. And we went out to dinner, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It was fantastic. It was just one of the most beautiful moments, one of the most incredible evenings, and one of the most incredible dinners I've ever had. And it was also by far the most expensive dinner I've ever had, right? And I really started thinking about this because I thought about that experience, and I thought about the difference between the old me and the new version of me, and where my consciousness is regarding it. Because the old me, number one, that dinner would have never have happened. Wouldn't even have considered it. There is no way it would have happened, because I would have been sitting there going like, it's too expensive, we can't afford it, we don't have the money for it, there's no way this is going to happen, and on and on and on and on and on. And I would have completely talked myself out of doing it. So that's old version Mike. That's 1.0 version Mike. But thank goodness, it was way different for me this time. So in the first place, we walked into the place, and I was like, this guest greeted us, the person, maitre d' greeted us so warmly, so wonderfully, started talking with this person, and it was just a beautiful exchange. And then all of a sudden, the waiter came up, and I started appreciating the way that he treated us and was acting towards us, and the way that he just made us feel so welcome. And there was a card on the table signed by half the staff about happy 10-year anniversary, congratulations. And then we started to order our food, and then we started having some wine, and then I started watching all of this around us and all the people, and I started thinking about, my God, think about what it took for this dinner to show up here. Think about, well, the waiter and the maitre d', but then think about all the people in the kitchen that are cooking this food. All of that is happening so that we can have this meal. And then I started thinking to myself, wow, think about how the food actually got here, and all the people and all the trucks and all the energy it took for the food to get to the restaurant. And then I started thinking about the farms and the places where the food came from. And I was just blown away about every single thing that needed to happen in order for us to have this incredible moment, an incredible dinner. People, I don't care. I would have spent every penny in my bank account to go have that meal and to go have that experience. It was the most expensive meal in my life. And you know what? I would do it again today and tomorrow and the next day. Do you notice a difference? Just a little bit? Just a little bit. It's consciousness, folks. It's consciousness. Like I said, much of my past was rooted in lack consciousness. I struggled with prosperity consciousness. And I'm not going to keep beating myself up for it, but I'm telling you, I had some really tough habitual habits that it took me a minute to kick, right? I had a really stubborn lack consciousness, really stubborn. I was good at it, really good at it, right? I could see lack everywhere I looked, and it didn't matter what happened. I would have an occasional blessing show up, but it wouldn't matter because I would see it, and guess what? I would start to be grateful for it, but then I would go, nah, I just got lucky. This isn't going to last. and stuff like that. And I kept being pulled back into lack consciousness every single time because I kept focusing on what I didn't have versus what I did have. That was one of the things I had to seriously look at in my own stuff. And so every single time the life would show up and God would try and give me something, guess what I immediately did? I crapped all over it. Excuse my language. But I did. I mean it. It was never good enough. It was never enough. It was never going to be around enough. It was never going to last long enough. Because of why? Lack consciousness. I couldn't get out of the rut of lack consciousness, right? And therefore, because of the fact that I was stuck in lack consciousness, guess what happened? The universe doesn't have a choice, folks. It has to keep matching your vibration. So guess what kept showing up for me? Lack. Lack, 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 right? And this impacted all areas of my life, by the way. It just wasn't my finances. Yes, of course, it impacted that, but it also impacted me having nice things. It also impacted the kind of jobs I attracted for myself in my life. It also impacted my relationships that I had in the past. It touched every part of my life. This lack consciousness did. And what I found out was that lack doesn't discriminate in any area of your life. It's going to impact every single area of your life because that's the way it works, right? And so as I thought about this and I started to do some deeper level work, I kept going like, why? Why is this one thing in my life like it's almost like kryptonite? Why does this thing cripple me? Why does it keep happening? And so I noticed that this really started to take hold when I was in my late teens and early 20s and then continued for a minute, right? And when I finally figured out what was causing it, it shook me. Like I was blown away. And because of the fact, you got to remember, I've told you the story 1,000 times. I've been in Unity since I was 16. And I was doing everything that I thought I could do to get out of lack consciousness, but it was still there. And it had a grip that was so hard for me to let go of. And I was like, what? Why? And so what happened was I heard stories of my mom's life here and there growing up as a kid, but I didn't know all the stories. And the cool thing was, as she got older, especially towards the end of her life, I got to she was shared with me some of her other stories. And so my mom's life was, she grew up wealthy. So my grandfather was an inventor, and he created something that made them very rich and very wealthy. It was called the Bartlett feeder. So the Bartlett feeder was a feeder used on farms to feed chickens, and it was used all over the United States and the world. In fact, to date, there are still Bartlett feeders that are being used. And so as a result of it, my mom grew up rich. They had maids. They lived in a really nice house in Detroit. They had a second home down in Florida that they traveled to all the time. And so she grew up wealthy. However, later in life, what happened was my grandfather got involved with some people who took total advantage of him. Totally. And as a result, they wound up losing almost everything. And so they had to move out of their nice home. They had let go of all their stuff, and they wound up living on just enough to get by. And so my mom was a teenager, and she experienced what that was like. And at that time, her world went from being wealthy and affluent down to basically struggle and strife. And that impacted the rest of her life. And as a result of it, my mom, when it came to money, could never relax, ever. She never believed it was going to be around. She never believed it was going to last. She always thought it was hard. And it just became a big thing for her in her life because she was afraid of losing everything that she had. And she lived in fear of it running out and not having enough, and developed the serious lack consciousness as a result of this. And even though my father was on it, my dad was a hard worker, he had his own business, and he did well. And as a kid, we grew up decently well off. We were kind of like upper middle class, somewhere around there, not high class, but we were definitely well cared for, right? But my mom had this trauma, and I had no idea the impact it was having on me, right? These stories, and then all of a sudden me realizing that this idea that money wasn't ever going to be around, or I could run out of it, or that it was going to be hard to make, or all these things grabbed me and they had me. And that's why I had always struggled with it. And when I saw this, it was like, oh my God, really? And it's like, yeah, because what happened was, guess who took on all of my mom's, because I was closer to my mom than my dad, guess who took on all my money beliefs that my mom had? Me. And so anytime it came to money, it never clicked. It never worked. And I always struggled with it. And it wasn't just me, by the way. We had 4 kids. It impacted deeply every single one of us throughout our entire life, because my mom was giving off this energy and all the kids picked up on that energy, period, right? And so without even realizing it, we all were impacted by her beliefs around money, right? And when I could finally see where it was, then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, look what I've been doing subconsciously. And so I started to do the work. And what I now believe, and so many people that have come before me, is that if I'm struggling with lack in any area of my life, I can do something about it. And all of that starts with what? Right here. Consciousness. It starts with consciousness, or what Butterworth calls changing your glasses. You see, before then, I was looking at life through lack-colored glasses, or lack consciousness. And lack consciousness has its own language. It does. It sounds something like this: I'll never have enough. Even when I do have it, it won't last. I'm not worthy to have it. Lack and struggle are my fate. Abundance is the exception, not the rule. Maybe someday I'll win the lotto. What am I missing up here, folks? What else could I throw up here? Any other thoughts about lack consciousness? Everything's expensive. I can't afford it. I don't deserve it. What else?
Someone else is doing it to me.
Somebody else is doing it to me.
People like me never have.
People like me never have enough. Right. And so, again, I keep going back to this example of the disciples, how they were thinking when they looked at the 5,000. There's nothing I can do about it. Nothing I can do about it. And the truth is, if that's where the story ended, then we wouldn't be talking about it 2,000 years later, would we? Right? And in my case, it would be a very sad story if that was the end of the story and I lived the rest of my life in basically lack and limitation. Thank God, and I mean that literally, thank you, God, and thank my soul for going through the experience and breaking through it, because I have. And so now I can tell you that I no longer struggle with it like I once did. And I'm grateful for that. How did I do it? I changed my consciousness. I changed it, right? And so I started working on it. Or using Butterworth's analogy, I began to change my glasses. I started looking through, and I talked about this last week, substance-colored glasses, which are different than lack-covered glasses. Again, it's a different language, right? Prosperity consciousness sounds a whole lot different than lack consciousness. I always have more than enough money. Money keeps coming to me all the time and in many ways. I'm worthy and gratefully receive it. Abundance is the rule, not the exception. I don't need to hit the lotto. I have everything I could ever want or need right now. Oh, a little bit different? Yeah, a little bit different. What am I missing? What else could I throw up there from a prosperity standpoint? There is enough. There is enough.
The world is my friend.
The world is my friend. I'm part of the flow. I am lucky.
I like to share my money.
I like to share my money.
I am the substance.
I am the substance.
People like me always have enough.
People like me always have enough. Yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. Can you notice, more importantly, can you feel, this is the thing I really want you to get. Can you feel the difference between the two states of consciousness? When you can feel the difference, that's where the work is, folks. You want to know where you're at with something? Feel what you're thinking about that thing to determine, am I looking through lack color glasses or am I looking through substance color glasses? The energy behind lack is heavy. There's nothing about it that's fun. As somebody that lived there for a long time, I can tell you it's not fun. It's not flowing. It's hard, extremely hard. Whereas prosperity consciousness is light. It's very light. It's fun. It's expansive. It's flowing. And it's easy. Right? And so, perfectly, when he says in the book, Spiritual Economics, the more conscious you become of its presence, of the living substance, the more it will manifest itself for you, and the richer will be the common good of all. Identify yourself with substance, and you will soon begin to rejoice in the ever-present bounty of God. As somebody who has struggled with this for many, many, many years, and I would even say decades of my life, I can tell you this is true. This has been my experience, is that when I started to work on my consciousness, things started to shift and change in my life. And then I could finally understand it and finally see it. And by the way, for me, this is just the beginning. I'm super excited about that. Super excited to see where this can go. And I would invite you to join me in that journey for those of you that might want a little something more in your experience. Whether it's health, whether it's finances, whether it's relationships, it doesn't matter. The same principles apply, right? And so I came up with this little formula and use it. And if you have any questions, please come see me or talk to me. Let's chat, shall we? Step one, change your glasses. I think, and my hope is that you can see the difference between. So it's kind of like going, well, what glasses am I seeing through, and maybe think about changing that, which in a sense is using, oh, there's a timing thing that's going on, folks. I'm sorry. Practice prosperous affirmations. We talked about some of them last week. So if you haven't seen that one, there was some pretty good ones that we used as well, right? I love this one. Practice being prosperous. What does that look like for me? I'm trying to practice it all the time. So I'm sitting in the shower this morning, right? Taking a shower. And you know what I figured out? It's a crazy thing. But do you know if you left the shower and the water on, it would run 24/7 and never stop? Folks, that's prosperous. And for me to just take a moment and acknowledge it, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, I'm just telling you, when you start to open your mind to this idea that it should always be flowing to me, and if it's not, what's wrong? Something's wrong. And just by acknowledging that, I live on 26 of the most beautiful acres I've ever seen in my life. Every day I walk onto that land and look around, and I am in awe of the beauty that is there and everything it takes to keep it that way. And it's just being in being. The key with that sentence is be it. Be prosperous. How do you be prosperous? You sit there and look around you and start giving thanks. And that's another one, is start blessing whatever you want more of. Start blessing it. When Jesus fed the 5,000, what did he do? He picked it up and he blessed it. Why? Because he knew that in order to have more of it, he could use blessing as one of the tools to increase what it is that he had. And so he did that. And then I just think this is like a no-brainer. It kind of goes back into what I was saying in terms of being prosperous. Well, how do you do that? Try being grateful. Try being grateful for everything that you've got, everything that you see. Try being grateful for, oh, I don't know, you. Try being grateful for, oh, I don't know, this building. Try being grateful for the differences we're trying to make in people's lives. Try being grateful for everything that you do have. You have more than you could ever imagine. If you don't believe that, I challenge you to go to a third world country and come back and tell me what you have versus what they don't. Because we live in one of the richest, if the richest country in the world. And when you go to a third world country, you understand everything that you have. It's incredible what we have. And I think we forget that sometimes. So, was this helpful? We're good? Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for everything that you bring. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for shining the way that you shine. We are lucky to have you, each and every one of you. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. God bless. Namaste. Namaway. Thank you so much. Thank you.